nearly a week after they murder Pemisapan, Captain Stafford spots ships coming in, and they, obviously it's the 1500s, they have no way to know whether these are friendlies, whether these are Spanish, what the hell's going on, and so they're like, ow, shit, I hope these are friendlies. And luckily, this turns out to be Sir Francis Drake, and Sir Francis Drake is a friendly. He was everyone's favorite privateer, and possibly the very reason, and very probably the very reason, why Roanoke even got okayed in the first place, because he was such a well-known privateer and so good at his job that, they really he was
the Capone of his time.
Yeah, he was why they needed a base for resupply, because he was like, yo, I'll get you even more of your stuff back if you give me a base.
He's like, I'm stealing a bunch of your shit back that someone stole from you. I'm doing a bunch of re-stealing here.
Yeah.
I need a base.
Yeah, he shows, though, at this serendipitous moment, because he had heard about the colony and was heading back from the Dominican Republic with refugees and slaves. He originally offers to leave 4 months' provisions for the colonists. However, then a hurricane hit. This damaged Drake's fleet, and so there's not enough ships really to go around, not enough provisions to go around, but he does have a ship that they can load the last of the garrison onto and sail back to England and just immediately go, and they're like, hell yeah, and dip out with no protest, including Manio, who goes with them. They even leave behind 3 men that had not returned from a mission yet. They were just like, can you imagine being those 3 men? And you're like, just there. It's 1586. It's March. You're on a mission. You come back and you're like, hey guys, we're back. And the crickets. Ships are gone. You're alone. There's only 3 of you.
Well, at least you're not alone then. There's 3 of you.
But hilariously, 2 weeks after they leave, the original supply ship shows up because it had been rerouted again. And so the original supply ship shows up, and they look for the colonists who are obviously gone, and they see that everything has gotten really hostile with the local tribes, and they decide to return to England too, because they were like, this is a shit kettle. Like, this is bad. But for some reason, when they get back to England, John White is convinced that they have to go back to Roanoke, and no one really knows why, because the first time didn't go well. Barely got out of there with their lives. But he manages to drum up some interest in the project again, and manages to get another go-ahead green light for the plan. In the spring of 1587, over 100 people meet in London to board the boats that were bound for Roanoke again. Manio would be returning once again to help facilitate relations with the indigenous people. Also going was White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Amadeus Dare. The second colony arrived somewhere around July 22nd, 1587. We don't know the exact date they arrived, but the history has kind of ballparked it there due to surviving journal entries and stuff. But no one, I guess, wrote down the exact date because they were like, who's going to read my journal? I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But the original village was still standing and needed minimal repairs, which was good news. But within a week, one of John White's assistants was shot and killed. White isn't sure, though, if it's cold blood murder or if he was mistaken for a deer. Some type of animal or something, and so he's like assuring the colonists that the mission is going to get better, and it's going to go better than the first, because they aren't all soldiers for one. They have a variety of people and professions. They're better prepared, I would say ish. I would say they're better prepared ish. And the village is already built, so they totally got this, right? They did not got this, but White decides, better safe than sorry, and he better go make peace. Or at least attempt to. So he, some colonists, and Manio sail south to Croatoan Island, where Manio is from, and they negotiate guidelines / a sort of treaty with the Croatoans. The Croatoans offer the colonists some corn, and then they break bread together. And then the Croatoans do what one always does over dinner, and they confess a deep, dark secret. John Howe, the colonist who'd just been shot, he'd been murdered, and they knew who did it. It had been a group of men loyal to Pimisipan that included One Cheese, the colonist's old friend.
Mm-hmm.
After some deliberation, the colonists decide that while peace had to be had with the Algonquins if they were to survive, John Howe had to be avenged. But at midnight on August 8th, 1587, White, Manio, and 24 other colonists went to the mainland to attack the Algonquin with surprise. They attacked a group gathering water the next morning that turned out to be all women and children. However, this didn't stop the men it didn't stop the men when they noticed. They just were following orders and just kept killing everybody, and obviously tensions grew even tenser with the Algonquins. But later that month, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, was born. Everyone was super happy, but they needed to return to England with one of the ships to resupply because the corn harvest had been so short that the Croatoans couldn't continue to provide them with any more food and they were going to starve. But none of them actually want to leave their families to go back to England to resupply because what if it gets too dangerous? And obviously someone had just been murdered and this hadn't gone well with the Algonquins, and they're like, I don't want to leave my family here to go back to England. And so they beg John White, the governor, to go. And John's like, I don't want to abandon you guys, or you guys are like my family. I don't want to abandon you guys. I don't think I should go. And they managed to convince him eventually to go by pretty much convincing him that he's in charge and he has to. And also, they draw up a contract saying that the colonists will protect his family and belongings while he's away, and him and a skeleton crew of 12 other men sail off back to England on August 27th. The return journey was plagued by a storm that steered them far off course. They didn't make it to England until November of 1987. They left in August. It's a 1-month journey. Yeah. As quick as White wanted to be, as quickly as Raleigh wanted him to be, a war was to be had with Spain, and Queen Elizabeth demanded he stay put because the ships were needed when he went to leave again. 'Cause she loves declaring war with Spain.
Again, that's a Thursday activity. Friday is not the same unless war is declared on Spain. I am actually confident that Spain can't function on Friday unless war is declared on them. If you were to just give them a Friday where they didn't have war declared on them, they'd be like, well, now what are we going to do?
They're like, well, you ruined it.
It's been a thing since the 1500s.
So somehow, even though there was a blockade put on all the ships because they were needed for war, White manages to pull some strings and gets 2 ships headed back to the colony. However, not even a quarter of the way into their journey back, they met enemy ships and kept hitting enemy ships over and over and had to return to England for needed repairs in May of 1587.
It's almost like you shouldn't try to sail in wartime.
White tried to set off again, but there was obviously a war going on. Yeah. And all the investors who were backing this colonization attempt were focused on that. Interest in another mission largely dies out until March of 1980. I said 1989. I definitely meant 1589. Interest in another mission largely dies out until March of 1589, when a guy named Thomas Harriot, this friend of White, wrote a book about the colony. And this kind of drummed up some new investors, and by the spring of 1590, 3 whole years after he left his daughter and granddaughter behind, he once again set sail for the colony on Roanoke. They arrive in August of 1590, and they see smoke from fires and assume that this means that the colonists are alive and well. But they arrive too late in the day to row that whole mile into shore. Tides are not with them, and what they do is they spend all night celebrating on the boat, and they're doing the last of their provisions and some wine, and they're celebrating, and they're singing songs, and they're trying to get shore to hear them because they think the colonists are there. And however, the next morning when they rowed ashore, they discovered that the fires were grass fires. The colony was destroyed. While some houses had been smashed apart, others had been left standing with no real rhyme or reason. All the guns were left behind in a store. The letters CRO were carved into one tree, and the road Croatoan carved into an entrance post. The site was abandoned. Everyone was gone. Where were the colonists? White was convinced that the settlers must have moved south to Croatoan Island like they had discussed possibly doing in the future when he was there, and back from England. But he thought, maybe they had to move. I was gone for 3 years. Shit happens. It's not like you can send a telegram. It's the 1500s.
Damn carrier pigeons.
Yeah. White demanded that the crew immediately sail south to check on the welfare of the settlers because, his wife and his daughter and granddaughter are there. However, when they went to pull up the anchor, so I don't know if you guys know, but these old ships, these big galleons that they would be sailing on, they had 2 anchors, one on each side, and that actually keeps them anchored. It's not one big giant anchor that would tip the boat with oncoming waves. So they have 2 smaller anchors, one on each side, to help weigh them down. And if you lose one anchor, you're kind of fucked until you can repair your anchor and anchor again. And so when they go to pull up one of the anchors, the chain snaps and they can't get the new they don't have a way to repair the anchor because they're at the colony, and they're almost out of fresh water, almost out of food because they'd been doing that celebrating, and it was so late in the season. It was unanimously decided that it was safer to return to the West Indies and resupply before coming back to check on the settlers again in another month because of how the currents move around the outer banks of what is now North Carolina and how dangerous it is to sail there. So the crew certainly mutinies against White to go back to the West Indies. They planned to go back in the spring, but storms forced them to return all the way back to England rather than just in the West Indies like they had planned. White would never return to the New World, and he would die without knowing what happened to his family. Raleigh sent out another scouting mission sometime in the early 1600s, but they saw none of the colonists and didn't exactly go searching for them. And that's it. That's all there is. So let's talk theories. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through the list of them really quick, and then we're gonna talk about each of them in depth, okay?
Okay.
Alright, so let's talk theories. We have murdered by the local tribes. This one is super likely. See, obvious, the murder of John Howe. See, entire first colony. See, it's pretty likely that this is what happened. We have murdered by the Spanish. Less likely, but still likely because of all the pirates and privateering. My bet is if they were murdered, it was the Algonquins, but hey, whatever gods are out there are the only ones who know what really happened to these people. So, number 3, you have moved south to Croatoan Island, assimilated, and essentially joined the tribe down there. So, there's evidence for this. So, for me, this is really likely because there's a lot of evidence to support this. There were tales of people, explorers in the area, encountering light-skinned blonde natives through the 1600s.